Welcome to Shadow of the Cast, a Marvel Champions podcast. I'm Villain Fury and I'm here with Nelston, and today we're talking about Web Warriors and Champions, both the heroes and kind of the cards in general, but mostly the heroes. Nelston, how's it going?
It's doing really well. I'm excited to be back talking about some of these older heroes. I just played Miss Marvel again. I broke her back out yesterday, and I'm really excited to kind of have played her leading into this podcast because she was kind of the first champion that we got, and kind of away from all the other champions and Web Warriors that we got. She was kind of the tease, I guess, for the rest of the wave. But I'm excited. I'm happy to be here with you. Just played a couple of games and ready to record and talk about some of my, I would say a lot of my favorite characters are in this category.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I would say some of my favorites are as well. I did my 15 favorite heroes video quite a while ago. Actually, probably one of the first videos on my channel, really. And 2 champions, I'm going to say, made it into that. Now, whether they still would be there today making it, I'm going to leave that a bit ambiguous, but it's certainly really fun to talk about it. And we've just about cleared up all the debris that D20 left from the last episode. So I think Miss Marvel is a great place to start. And I think what's so interesting, like you say, we got her earlier. She was the second hero pack, I think, ever released for the game, which is like super early on. And it took, several expansions to then get back to champions. But I think she's held up really well.
And one of the things that I have found so interesting about this game is the second hero pack ever released. She's still very unique in the way that she approaches the game versus a lot of the other heroes that we have, and just being able to go back to some of these older heroes and play a completely different game. Like, she's all around these events. She's not really using her basic activations because of her, I think it's her morphogenics ability, where she's able to pull events back. It just creates so many cool puzzly decisions, and Miss Marvel is one of the ones in my top 3, and that's one of the reasons why. And so, just like one of the first heroes we got, she's so much fun, and you can do some weird things with Miss Marvel that you can't do with hardly any other character.
Yeah, you can do some really, really interesting things with her. She's just so unique, so different, and like you say, the morphogenics ability is probably my favorite part. Some events kind of combo when you play it more than once on the same turn. Some events are just really good, you play it on the same turn again. But sometimes you can, because of the response timing, you can play something in response to something, then respond to it with morphogenics, get that card back in your hand, use it again for the same thing. Wiggle Room, her own card, probably the most obvious one for that, which is a card which reduces the damage you take by 3 and draws you a card for 0 cost, which is exceptional.
Pretty good.
Yep, not bad. Possible.
I've seen worse cards.
Yeah, 0 cost card that replaces itself and does something really good. I mean, I guess I could see it getting used. She's just really good, and I think she also, my other favorite part about her, I would say, is Embiggen and Shrink. Those upgrades which change the values on events you play, attack and forwarding events respectively, kind of brings new life to any attack or forwarding event, and that is so interesting to me.
Yeah, 100%. I love the morphogenics ability, but my favorite thing from that kit are those 2 upgrades, especially when you start looking at the multi-attacks or the ones that can get modified. So the go-to, I think, easy one to kind of compare it to is like melee or 1x1 from the aggression aspect, where it deals 2 damage. If you defeat a unit, deal 2 damage for 1x1. Now, if you embiggen that, now it's a 1 cost for 4 and 4, and it gets pretty easy to start defeating minions at a 4. You morphogenics that thing back, you pop it back, you hit 2 and 2 again. Oh, it's just so satisfying. If you go melee, now we're looking at a 5/5, and then one of my favorite things, which probably is not the most optimal thing to do, but I like big numbers and I cannot lie, is you combine that with like Hone Technique, and now you're just adding on. you just do a stupid amount of damage, and it is one of the more fun things to do. Probably a little bit more optimal in a multiplayer setting, but it's a good time.
Yeah, as someone who normally plays kind of 2-player, I'd say more than 1 player. Melee Hone Technique, I absolutely love it. Even honestly, Hone Technique and 1x1 kind of underrated, because it's a 1 cost card, so Hone Technique's only boosting its damage by 1, kind of, because it's 2 targets. You're actually getting a 2 damage boost on that still a lot of the time. It's obviously a little bit harder to avoid excess kind of wasted damage sometimes with those cards, but nonetheless, it's still very, very good value. Very, very much enjoy that. And then you've got like No Quarter, which you can embiggen, and Hone Technique, and now that is a card which, for all the excess damage you do, which you've now increased with those kind of methods, you get to discard from your deck and draw any aggression cards you find. So loads of really fun stuff there. And even talking about, Shrink, the forwarding version, we've got Justice with things like multitasking, or even Overwatch. You can kind of helps to, you can duplicate the extra threat removal in those ways as well.
Yeah, and I think I really like Shrink for her, and I really like the Justice aspect for her with the access to Confuse, which we do have a little bit outside of the Justice aspect at this point. But being able to flip down and take advantage of her incredibly good alter ego kit, right? She's got the 3 persona supports, which are going to reduce cost, going to draw you cards, put cards back on the bottom of your deck with Amir, which is very, very good. You can kind of set up a perfect turn if you want to. You can combine everything you want, and then that also draws you a card. And then also Bruno is able to kind of store cards for that perfect turn. As an alter ego action, you can put a card under Bruno. In my game yesterday, I put Go for Champions, and now with the errata Go for Champions getting removed from the game after you play it, it came in clutch because that one turn I was like, if I survive this one turn, I was like, wait, I can. I just pull Go for Champions off Bruno, and then we're good. Like, let's go. And so there's just a lot of ways to play. She also has the Teen Spirit, discard cards until you hit a Miss Marvel card. Now that we have like Digging Deep and all the White Foxes of the world, like those combo, it just feels like Miss Marvel is a character that every single time a pack gets released, you have to look at how it's going to affect Miss Marvel's kit because she's so dynamic and plays off of so many different ways that the game can be approached. Oh gosh, she's so much good. She's so good. She's so much fun.
Yeah, honestly, I don't think anyone else plays like her in any of her little ways. No one else has those kind of alter ego supports. Yeah, and okay, maybe George Stacy is a little bit like Bruno, and we've got other cards which can like discount people, like Nakia, I think it is. We've got things that are similar. We've got other ways to discard until you find a certain card, but no one does it in quite the same way. No one does it in that combination. Such a unique puzzle, and yet every time there's a new pack, like you say, all these things are still good for her, despite that, despite how different she is. I guess Gambit can also increase the sort of damage attack events do kind of in a similar way, but it's
right.
Still build Miss Marvel and Gambit completely differently overall. Although they do both like that 1x1 kind of thing, but nonetheless, very, very interesting. So huge fan of Miss Marvel. What is your favorite aspect for her?
Oh, I was about to ask you the exact same thing. If I'm going solo, my favorite aspect is going to be, well, I think overall, it's protection. Protection with Miss Marvel is dumb. She can run that perfect defense, wiggle room, bounce it back to your hand, hit wiggle room again if you need to prevent like 6 damage. Just, it is pretty easy to not take any damage with Miss Marvel, and you can trigger all of your kind of unflappables, hard to ignores, and it gets really fun really, really quickly. I think in a multiplayer aspect, she can just be an incredibly efficient thwarting machine, and so in like the higher player counts 3, 4, I'd probably lean more towards Justice. What about you?
That's interesting because I hear some people do talk about protection for her. For me personally, doesn't quite do it for me. I actually really like aggression and justice at any player count. That's the one that does it to me. To some people, it's going to be maybe a bit overdone, but turn the tide, exhaust Miss Marvel, get it back down, turn the tide again. That's basically I've exhausted and given a card, and I've done 6 damage, kind of split in 2 ways really neatly. Just super efficient. So I really enjoy that. And justice will help me go alter ego more to use that because I'd say the downside of protection is if you're flipping down to alter ego, you're not getting your unflappable and stuff triggering unless you've got taunt on that, which Bruno can hold on that, but it's a lot of steps and things got to line up for that. So pros and cons. I will say, I'm guessing we're both going to agree on this, and I'd be curious what you say. Leadership doesn't do it for me with Miss Marvel. If I'm playing leadership, I'm rather playing like almost any other hero in the game.
Yeah, leadership is a little tough for Miss Marvel. I'm struggling to come up with how I'd even approach that build. I did it at one point because I streamed it, but there aren't a lot of attack or thwart events, which her Morphogenics ability is limited to attack or thwart events. And so it feels like you're kind of missing out on a lot of that ability. Now, we do have a little bit of champion support in blue, but yeah, no, leadership is definitely the bottom of my list.
Yeah. Another character that I think is very similar to Miss Marvel is Nova. And Nova came out several expansions later with the other champions in Sinister Motives. And what I think is really fascinating about Nova and Miss Marvel is I think of all the champions, they're the 2 most event kind of driven heroes. But also, Nova has Miss Marvel as his signature ally. And she does kind of the same thing the hero does. You exhaust her, you can bounce an event back. So some of these combos you can do with Miss Marvel, you can kind of do with Nova with the signature ally as well. And even some different ones, as it's not limited to attacks and forwarding and defense cards. What do you think about Nova?
Nova is another character that I just have so much love for, mainly because of how explosive Nova can be. Unleash the Nova Force is just the definition of a fun card. Like there is no, I don't think anyone can argue that it's not fun when you go unleash and then like defeat 12 minions, draw 12 cards. Like it's just, you just feel like it's satisfying. And so I very much enjoy those types of turns. But even outside of that, I think Nova is one of the like heroes. I mean, he starts with Ariel. He starts with a resource generator on the table. He's not limited in his hand size, right? A lot of the times when we see like people who start with resource generators, they typically have a lower hand size. Think Psylocke, right? But he has, I guess he doesn't start with it, but you effectively start with it. That's what you're going to do with his alter ego. You're going to go get the helmet. So then what I like about Nova is I feel like he was kind of the first hero that we got that played a lot around how resources affect him differently than other characters. What I mean by that is a lot of his event cards deal with wild resources. So like Potshot doubles the number of wild resources. When you pay for Potshot, wild resources are doubled. So it's a 2-cost card for 4 damage, which is not super efficient, especially for a hero card. We want to see that a little bit higher. Now, if you pay for it with a wild, which is Helmet is a wild resource generator, then it's a 1 for 4, and that's right there on the curve. And so we like that a lot. And so being able to kind of load your deck up with more and more wild resources, even if maybe you wouldn't normally do so. I'm thinking like Power of Aggression. You know, we kind of talked in the past, you want about 10 targets for Power of Aggression in order for that to trigger. Now you can start counting all of his pot shots and his event ones towards that minimum, and it gets a lot easier to start including those. And so both Miss Marvel and Nova, I feel like, break the standard deck building rules pretty significantly. And so I'm a big fan when characters do that.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. There are some Nova decks where I don't really add that many wilds. I'll try and get a couple of extra ones in, but basically, if I have to not use a wild for his setup ability, his opening ability and alter ego to get that helmet, I'm just paying 2 for the helmet instead of 1 effectively. And it's so good either way because that helmet, the way I look at it, is a dirt cheap Quinn carrier that I can use twice because I activate and it readies up. Like, that is absurd. He's such a rich hero. I think that's probably his biggest strength, is that he has so much money to go from the beginning. You know, he's one of those characters that I think of all the characters in the game, turn 1 and turn 2 is one of the most powerful just because he has more money than most characters will at that point. And I think that's really, really strong. But I do love to add those wilds in as well to fuel his events. Now, sometimes I feel like the helmet covers enough for all of them and I don't need to worry about it. But other times, especially if you've got this big Unleash turn and you just need to play one more event to trigger it again, that's when it comes in so useful. And we've actually got some new wilds in the game with the last wave. We've got the Domino Leadership Ally. We've got Deadpool in the basic sort of quote-unquote aspect. And we've got a few more as resource cards here and there. But just having allies with wilds that are pretty usable in a big variety of decks, I think is really interesting. Mm-hmm. And I love how fast-paced he is. Now, something actually I heard you say when I watched your stream yesterday playing that Miss Marvel against Magneto game, you were saying Miss Marvel is really fun for the sequencing. And she has some fun sequencing. But Nova also has that sequencing, especially with that Unleash Nova Force. And I do want to shout out a conversation that was happening on my Discord server recently. People talking about Phoenix and unleashing. And thinking about it now, the way Nova unleashes is just so satisfying. It really does feel like he is unleashing and everything's going on. Someone played in my store recently, I think at the last event, and they were just, destroying things left, right, and center. They're like, leave these minions on the board. I've got a plan for them. And it's like, whack-a-moling them, readying themselves up and going crazy. And I don't think a lot of Arrow characters can do that. One that reminds me of Nova that is more recent is X23, just with those cheap cards of being able to play a lot and kind of like do a lot of sequencing. But Nova's very much event-based, and you can build him in so many interesting different ways.
Or you don't even have to sequence. You can run Home Technique, Dive Bomb, and then take out the 12 minions at the table, draw 12 cards, and I think you just win after that. The last thing that I will say about Nova into the transition to a character that I think loves leadership is I think Nova leadership is fairly decent, especially like in a solo play. I guess it works in multiplayer too, but you can use allies to set yourself up to defeat minions or side schemes. So a lot of the times when I'm playing Nova, he has fairly low stats, and so you don't necessarily have the attack power to take out that 3 health minion. But if you have an ally, and you can do this in any aspect, I guess, but leadership helps facilitate this with readies and all of this, and you can poke 2 damage at a 3 health minion. Nova can take him out, then you get to ready. And so I feel like a ally supported Nova Nova likes allies more than Miss Marvel, or Nova likes leadership more than Miss Marvel, I should say. But I think our next champion loves leadership. But real quick before we go, what are your thoughts on Nova and leadership?
I originally didn't really like Nova in leadership, and it wasn't I didn't think it was good, but I just didn't think it was as good. Nowadays, I've kind of come around to it, especially in solo, like you say. I do think, leadership is leadership at the end of the day. It is good for everyone. If you build in the way that leadership can be most leadershipy, it's gonna do some really good things for you. But like you say, we should probably move on to the next champion hero, who definitely does really like leadership. It's gonna be Ironheart. And I've definitely played plenty of Ironheart, but Ironheart is one of my partner's favorite characters. So normally when she's at the table, because my partner is playing her, and she is always so much fun.
Ironheart is very good in Marvel Champion. She's one of the most powerful heroes in the game, and the reason that we're saying that she likes leadership so much is I at least am saying that because of one of our newer allies from the X-Men wave, which is Beast, and her Stroke of Genius card is a resource card, which is really, really good. It's a mental resource. You get a progress counter, which is Ironheart's whole gimmick, right? 6 progress counters, you get to level up to version 2, 6 more, level 3, and then after that, every single progress counter is 2 damage. That's not an attack, not blocked by stun, doesn't get retaliate. It's maybe could have been capped a little bit, but like she's really good. But Stroke of Genius, mental resource, get a progress counter, and draws a card. So it's so much effectiveness out of one card. And now that Beast, we can just go grab Beast. We can just recur Stroke of Genius, and you can level up so very fast. It's so crazy. Just rapid response Beast, make the call Beast, just get Beast onto the table as many times to get Stroke of Genius, and then I think my fastest version 3 was probably turn 3 or 4. Like it you can get there quick.
Yeah, you can get there really quick, especially with Moon Girl in combination. And Beast and Moon Girl both have that genius trait, as does Ironheart. So I guess geniuses like to stick together.
Yep.
But it's it's really effective, and Ironheart is really strong. Now, I would say she's got one of the strongest late games in Marvel Champions. I don't think early on, I think she can be a little bit vulnerable, and with bad draw, like you don't always set up as quickly. But if you do, and in most games, let's face it, she does so incredibly well. And I think she's another character a bit like Nova. I've definitely got my preference for aspect with her, but I don't think she has a bad aspect per se, especially in multiplayer, but definitely in solo play as well. Especially now we've got more confuses in the other aspects to help her flip, so that can help her get more progress counters as well. Shoutouts to Ronnie. Just so many kind of good options, honestly. But I would say, if I had to pick one, I do like that Beast deck. I've posted one on Marvel CDB, and people talk about it. People will refer to me and say, "Oh, I played this deck," and people just love Beast and Ironheart. It does so well.
It's so much fun. I agree with you. I don't think that she has a bad aspect. You could probably run her with just all basic warnings and she'd be perfect. She'd be fine. And like that's I think that is a testament to how strong her kit actually is. But being able to flip down, trigger all of those like supports that she has in Alter Ego, that's where she's going to get a lot of her progress counters. Her events will give her progress counters as well, but you can spend resources in Alter Ego to get those progress counters. She has her support that gets her progress counters. When she was previewed, I was kind of wondering how frequently we would be getting to version 3. And it's like, would that be a decision that you have to make in game? It's like, okay, this game we're pushing for that mid game strategy. We're going to hit version 2 and then we're going to go. And then like got her on the table. It's like, oh, we get to version 3 real quick. So, but yeah, I think I would argue that she probably has she is probably the best late game hero because those progress counters are not capped. All of these villains, especially when you're looking at flipping a villain into something that has really negative or like a really big boost to the villain when they flip into stage 3. I'm thinking Venom Goblin, the goblins that deal you 3 encounter cards when you flip to stage 3. If you know how much damage you need to do, if you know that you have to deal the 26 damage or whatever it is, build up 13 progress counters, flip them, say I win the game now. That's all you really have to do. And you can build progress counters so quick. It's insane. So she's very, very good late game.
Yeah, it's interesting, thinking about this. I think most of these designs come from Michael Boggs, who left FFG, but was one of the lead designers on this game, and his designs are still very beloved to this day, I would say, for the most part. We don't talk about Ronan, which wasn't his fault from what it sounds like. There's a lot of stuff going on. But why I brought this up is actually something I heard, I think, on a different podcast. I really need to start taking note of where I heard these things. It was years ago. But I heard that he had to redesign Ironheart in like the space of 2 weeks
Oof.
because, yeah, because apparently something on the cards, there just wasn't any space, no actual feasible way to translate it into one of the other languages they need for how they, because the game is distributed in different languages.
Oh wow.
They like, well, he had to make like a major change because something just didn't work printed on the card. And I think he ended up saying, he had to go really intense on that, really, really quick. But people ended up loving Ironheart. I mean, I think she regularly tops polls and like, certainly the highest champion character on polls that people like. And he thinks, she actually came out better despite him having to do that. So I just wanted some interesting trivia to throw out there. And
Yeah.
I just think they did a fantastic job on these characters. They all just, like you said, fun.
100%. So I think I like Web Warriors even more than I do champions. I'm starting to realize, looking at our list, we have a lot of the best characters in the game that fall into these two categories. I mean, like the Venn diagram of S tier and these characters are pretty overlapped. So Miles Morales came to us in Sinister Motives, all about status lock.
I think he's kind of, decently powerful. He could probably take on a couple villains.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's strong. Like you're saying, a lot of very, very strong characters in these traits. Now, I think Miles kind of suffers from a little bit of what Ironheart suffers. Ironheart might suffer from it more. I didn't say this when we talked about her, but my biggest critique of her is that her signature kind of cards have kind of like a game plan you want to work toward, get those progress counters power up. That no matter what aspect and deck you play for her, a lot of the time your priorities, your kind of, flow of the game, it's going the same way. I need to get those progress counters, I need to power up, and then I just win because I've got Ironheart toys and they're so, so strong. Miles Morales' cards as Spider-Man are so very good. A lot of the time you see one of his events, it's so incredibly efficient and powerful, you want to play it. So even, playing him in different aspects, you still kind of gravitate a lot toward his event cards, I would say, which is a slight detriment. But I do actually really enjoy playing Miles Morales. I think he's really fun. I like that a bit like Venom. He wants specific resources to trigger different effects, and he doesn't have a easy resource generator either. He does have the web shooters, but they have limited uses of that, and it's not too difficult to do. Sometimes you have to make the hard cut. You have to use a card you wanted to play to power up another card, and I like that kind of thing. I like Double Life that lets you change, forms to Alter Ego, ready up, get kind of an easy healing or something there. So I think he has some really fun tools. He's very, very strong. His events are very, very good.
Very efficiently costed. Like Arachnobatics is an incredible card because he's all about stun locking using, or status locking, I should say, with his camouflage and his Venom Blast ability, giving stun and confuse. And then Arachnobatics, I always get that confused with Attack Acrobatics, which is the Widow card. But the Arachnobatics for the Arachnid is damage plus 1 damage plus 3 damage per status if they are stunned, plus 3 damage if they're confused. Which is like, that's a lot to set up, and then you realize it's 2 effective costs. It's 1 printed cost card, and you're like, oh, that's very, very good, especially with how easy it is to dish out those status cards. And one of the reasons why I don't think that he's hindered as bad as a lot of the other heroes that rely so heavily on status with Steady. Now, I think Stalwart, that's a tough matchup for Miles. He can still do it because his events are so good, and he can target himself with like Tough and everything. But for Steady, you sit out with because does Arachnobatics work with a Steady? Because I think it is if it just has the card, correct? Like it's not fully stunned.
Yeah, so 2 things. I do want to say Black Widow is also a type of spider. So the Arachnobatics thing, Attack Acrobatics, is really confusing.
Fair.
I need to shout that out because
that's hilarious.
It's happened to me.
I never put that connection. That's funny.
But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. The wording on Arachnobatics is different to something like Press the Advantage. The villain doesn't need to be stunned. It needs to have a stun card on them. So Steady actually makes Arachnobatics easier to hit more damage on, which is, whether that's a net gain or not, it's probably still a loss overall, compared to them not being Steady. But it's, it's got that little kind of hidden upside. So yeah, Miles does very well against every villain. Steady slows him down a little bit. Stalwart slows him down quite a lot, but he's still so good.
Yeah, and yeah, like we were saying earlier, Stalwart does slow him down, but his events are so efficiently costed that you can still just play his events and lose out on some of that status and still be pretty okay.
Yeah, I need to talk about Swing In, which is what I think is his most overpowered card because it's basically for Justice, But they said, what if we made a card that is for justice, but you get a tough and confuse the villain at the same price? And you have to hit the right, the right resource, and it is a signature card, so it should be a bit more powerful than an aspect card. But 2 status cards and 4 threat removed for 2 cost is that's a card that will take you places. And even if the villain is stalwart, like you say, he can give himself toughs. That will give him that tough, and you're just fine. Thanos can punch you in the face, and you don't even have to blink with that tough card.
Yep. And yeah, just he's so good. I think a lot of the combat to stalwart villains that we've seen are jump blocking and tough status cards. And Miles, with his incredibly low-costed kit, that gives him tough status cards, solves half that equation. But also, if you are going up against a stalwart villain, you have the resources and the leeway to add in higher cost cards or even higher cost allies to just kind of chump block for yourself and then kind of negate that way. And so you can do so much with Miles. You can run him super low cost, just be super uber flexible. He's good. He's very, very good.
I also put him in the same category kind of as Nova, kind of what you're saying about that high impact. He's high impact kind of from like turn 1 and 2. He hits the ground running. And he can kind of, in multiplayer, carry heroes that take a bit longer to set up, like Ironheart. So they go together really well, especially with something like Go for Champions helping both of them. So there's a lot you can do with Miles.
And we've kind of already talked about Spider-Man. Spider-Man plays with the Web Warriors just like he can, but I feel like Web Warriors are almost, a lot of them at least, feel like you want to play the Web Warrior kit rather than the aspect cards, right? We were talking about Ironheart Spider-Man, you want to play their kit cards. And I think loosely defined, a lot of the times Web Warriors, you want to play kind of the Web Warrior package. And so I'm kind of curious if we want to talk about the basic Web Warrior package, because I think that's going to be a really nice foundation as we go into the discussion of what Web Warriors can do.
Yeah, it's so interesting because the basic Web Warrior package is so strong. But I actually think the signature cards on the Web Warrior heroes are also really, really good. And I do think there's one kind of exception to that. One Web Warrior I don't think is as strong as the others, but it's still a perfectly good and strong character. And
it's Spider-Ham, isn't it?
Maybe. I'm kind of thinking, no, I like their signature cards, but no, I like the Web Warrior basic cards. I like all of them. They are so strong. So yeah, we should definitely talk about them. One of the things I wanted to say when we're talking about Spider-Man Miles Morales, he might want to, get cheap allies, block with them as well, while he's still getting all those extra effects and things. The Web Warrior allies want to leave play. They want to be hurt. They want to, sometimes there are advantages of them leaving play on the player turn because of the Warrior of the Great Web card, but we'll probably talk about that in a little bit. But they want to leave play and they get all these awesome benefits for doing so.
Web of Life and Destiny is, I think, the key to kind of pulling this all together. And you can run this. We were talking about soft lock. You just have to control a Web Warrior card in order to play a lot of these allies. Web of Life and Destiny is a Web Warrior card. So there's a couple of hoops that you can jump through. The benefit is if you have the Web Warrior trait, you get to ignore the resource cost of Web and Life and Destiny, which every time a Web Warrior leaves play, not only are you getting the benefit of that card leaving play that's typically printed on their text box, but now you get to choose a player to draw a card. In solo, I would highly recommend choosing yourself. In multiplayer, it gets even more flexible because it's an Avengers Mansion that you can pass out to other players. And as I've started kind of diving a little bit more into the two-handed and the multiplayer play, that can be really critical. If you have Nova over here and it's like, okay, I just need one more card and I can pull off this incredible Unleash turn, then you can kind of set him up to do that. And I think that that's a really fun way to kind of be looking at the Web Warriors, is to play almost a support role in like the multiplayer. But they have so many good basic allies. They have some really good allies in the justice and protection aspect as well, which can trigger off Warrior of the Great Web. Or I'm sorry, Web of Life and Destiny. And it's fun. I like bouncing cards and triggering everything and having a good time. Like it's a blast.
Yeah, that's so good. I really like the Otto Octavius Spider-Man basic ally. The Peter Parker basic Spider-Man ally is one of the strongest, I think, in the entire game. If you can trigger his effect as a Web Warrior hero, he readies you up. It's incredibly efficient. And yeah, Web of Life and Destiny card draw. I will say, unless I'm playing Spider-Ham, the other Web Warrior heroes, I do like to take the card myself quite often, and it's a bit speedy, but their signature cards are so good. And the other Web Warrior cards I might find are so good. We talked about this a little bit in previous episodes, I think the Avengers episode, that Spider-Man, Peter Parker, and Spider-Woman can become Web Warriors with the Warrior of the Great Web card. And I will say when I'm playing Spider-Man, Peter Parker, with that, with Web of Life and Destiny, then I do like to play him kind of in a support way and give those cards out a lot more. That's probably my favorite way to use it in a support kind of role.
The Warrior of the Great Web from Inima, which is actually one of the submitted questions, which I think is kind of interesting. Why do you think they didn't let SPDR get on the Warrior of the Great Web? Because she technically does not have Spider in her title, so she cannot play that card. Any thoughts around that?
I need to make a confession. I don't think I've said anywhere before here. When this card came out and SPDR did, and I wanted to use these together so badly.
Yep.
I wrote into the rules team at Fantasy Flight Games saying, this is intended, SPDR, I think it's meant to be pronounced Spider, which I think it genuinely is.
Yeah.
This is intentional. Can I use this with her? They said no. They said
oh no,
not. which was clear on the card, I'm going to be honest, but I was so hopeful. So I kind of hate that she can't use it. She's a web warrior. Warrior of the Great Web is kind of just a long form of web warrior. I really wish she could use it. So it's a small annoyance to me, I would say. But on the flip side, I don't think she needs it. We'll talk about her more soon, so it's fine. But I don't know. I kind of feel like this was the best way they could word it to make it work with Spider-Man, Peter Parker, and Spider-Woman, and not other heroes. So I don't know. I think they could have made the exception for her, though. I think they could have just said, also, if you've got the Web Warrior trait, you can also play this. So
a lot of text on the card, but
they could do it.
They could do it. They could do it. But you know what you said? Let's talk about Spider later. Let's just talk about her now. I love SPDR. Oh my gosh, she is so much fun. She works on these interface upgrades. She has a really small hand size, which I thought was going to be hugely detrimental when she was previewed. Right? In a hero form, she gets 3 hand sizes. So it's like, you can't do anything. And that's just not true. Because all of her interface upgrades can function. They have a dual function. They can function as resource generators, where you can exhaust them to generate the resource of the printed icon on their card. Or you can exhaust them to get a bonus to a stat, host spider readies. There's a couple of different utilizations that you can get out of them. And if you can combine that with Warrior of the Great... If you can combine that with Web of Life and Destiny, you get card draw there. Mansion gets card draw. Oh my... I played Spider yesterday as well, actually. This is kind of funny. I didn't even really plan that, but Spider and Miss Marvel were the 2 characters I played yesterday. Spider is one of my favorite. I feel like I keep saying this. I like all the Marvel Champions characters, but I feel like Spider is a very unique character.
I used to not really like SPDR, Spider very much at all. And games went really well. She felt strong, but something just didn't click for me. People kept saying, she's got all these options. It's, tons of things you can do. To me, it felt a bit like a kind of a flow chart. Like, oh, I need to do this, and this is the most efficient way. And I knew because I'm a very numbers-based player, like what I kind of wanted to put where. But I gradually come around to really, really enjoying her. And I think that reached its peak with the pool aspect, because now I've got cards like Stick-to-Itiveness. I can ready up an extra time on top of Host Spider, on top of the Peter Parker basic Web Warrior ally, and things get kind of crazy. Giving anyone laser swords is fun, but giving them SPDR, it's just really fun. That's this kind of mech robot thing with lightsabers, and she's just really fun overall. I do like interesting thing talking about how her sort of resource generators, those interfaces, can do 2 things. I would love more resource generators that had a second option. Maybe you don't need an extra resource for your hand of cards. If it could do something else, wouldn't that be fun? Or if you had a really tough decision between them, like she kind of does have sometimes, I think that could be really fun. So such a cool design space. I believe MJ, who is was the lead designer for Arkham, helped design her, and it's such an interesting, unique design. So yeah, SPDR, really unique, really fun, and very different character. Kind of like Miss Marvel, she's absolutely absurd. She's just very different to anything else we've ever seen.
Yeah, and I love playing SPDR in protection because of all those readies. She can, thwart using, and I'm not going to remember all of her upgrades names right off the top of my head, but she has the upgrade that can add +2 whenever she thwarts, and she has a 2/2/2 stat line. Like, it's not like a 1/1/2 stat line which we see on Nova, right? She can thwart for 4. Host Spider can ready, then she can attack for 4, and then she can ready with what doesn't kill me. She has a 14 printed health, which means that she can use limitless stamina to ready. She has so many readies, and oh my goodness, if we could only put Warrior of the Great Web on her, it would be awesome. But one of the things that I do like to look at with her is, especially for kind of the offensive player stat boost, where I'm thinking heroic intuition, combat training, Now we have the specialized cards. If we can up her thwart and or attack, which we're probably going to be doing multiple times in each player phase, those are get very, very valuable for her laser swords, like you said, because she's going to be able to ready minimum one time with Host Spider. You got 3 limitless staminas, which help ready her. Peter Parker is going to ready her. She's going to activate more times than she's in the 90th percentile of activations. What did I say? 10th percentile? Whatever. She's very high up in how many times she's going to activate. And so anything that can boost her stats, she very much loves.
Have you ever heard of this little card called All Systems Go?
All systems. I see. I'm not a fan. It doesn't work for me. No, that's absolutely a joke. And it's so good. She has a lot of multi-use cards. Like every single card can be like used as a resource or a stat boost. All Systems Go is, I think, the reason why Spider works so well. But tell me about All Systems Go.
So All Systems Go is, I think it's a one-cost event that you can use to find one of your interface upgrades, from your deck. You can, if you need your interface upgrades, which is her priority to set those up early on. That's kind of her, kind of like Einhardt wants to level up with progress counters. She wants to quote unquote level up with interface upgrades. So if you haven't found them, you've got a small hand size. Where are those interface upgrades? All Systems Go can grab it for you. That's excellent. But where All Systems Go really shines is in the late game, once you've got a good amount of interfaces, 4 or 5. And this card just readies them all up. And that's insanely strong because you can then ready up with Host Spider, you get attack bonuses with, I think, web fluid compression, and you can just do anything you need with her once you've got the interfaces. And All Systems Go lets you do anything you need a second time. And that's why I kind of say she competes with Einhardt for a really strong late game. Once Einhardt is version 3, you're kind of cruising at that point in most scenarios on most of the normal difficulties. Same for SPDR Spider. If you have all your interface upgrades out, you are probably cruising toward victory most of the time, and it's just very, very good.
It is incredible how quickly she can set those up because she has 3 of those All Systems Goes in her deck. All Systems Go works really well. She has a lot of really cool cards that combo with that, but I think Warrior the Great, jeez, I keep doing it. Web of Life and Destiny, Avengers Mansion, and the interface upgrades, things that, and specialized training. I don't think I've actually run her with specialized training, which now after she does the thing that you get from that link card, whether it be thwart or attack, you get a card draw. Just throw as much card draw into Spider as you can, and she's going to be able to pay for the cards you draw.
It's very, very good. I have tried her with that card a few times, specialized training, and it goes well.
It goes well.
It goes well.
She is a fan. Oh my goodness. Yeah, so that's Spider. Anything else before we move on to... I'll let you pick who we wanted to talk about next.
I will pick Ghost Spider. Kind of, I like things in release order so much.
Nice.
And she came out earlier than the other one we've not talked about, and that is my amazing logic. Ghost Spider is, I'm going to lead with this. Ghost Spider fans, I'm sorry. I think she's the weakest web warrior, but I still think she's very good. What do you think about that?
No, I think that's... It's not that she's a weak character. It's just that her competition is so steep. Ghost Spider is probably, I think my favorite out of the Web Warriors. Just, I love the defense build, which she naturally gravitates towards with being able to ready after you play responses, a lot of constant readying, that 3 defense stat. She wants to be defending like that. That's kind of the natural progression of what she wants to be doing, and so I naturally just like that. So I enjoy Ghost Spider probably the most, but I would agree. I think she is the weakest out of these. She has a lot of requirements on her cards, which is an artificial cost increase in my opinion. Right, a 2-cost card that has a mental requirement costs more than a 2-cost card. You just have to make it work, and she doesn't have any resource generators. She has card draw in her kit, but she doesn't have like a wild resource generator. She doesn't have access to a wild resource generator. And so that can make it kind of difficult to trigger some of these responses or some of these requirements that she has. That being said, she's so much fun. Oh my gosh. Being able to draw cards after you play response cards, being able to trigger, being able to throw damage with like her ghost kicks or phantom flips, removing threat during the villain phase, because it's after any activation. This is a response, so you can defend, you can phantom kick that rhino minion into oblivion before he gets to activate if you defend against the villain attack. It's a good time. And I just played her recently a couple weeks ago, and she's a blast. She really is. What do you think about Ghost Spider in terms of fun?
So the biggest compliment I can give her is that when I play perfect defense protection on her, I enjoy it. I don't like that.
Nice. Yeah, with the 3 defense, armored vest goes up to 4. Specialized training, she gets 5 defense. She's not taking damage, and so she can trigger the hard to ignore. She can trigger the unflappables, and with her web bracers. Whenever you play a response, which she wants to be doing, interrupt or response, which she wants to be doing, because that gets her a ready each phase. You get to draw a card. And so allow all of your defensive events, you can kind of offset. You don't even have to run like the armored vest or specialized training. I would probably recommend at least running one of them, but you can kind of offset with all the events. You get to ready. She can protect the entire table. She can stand up if you're playing solo and have an activation in the player phase. It's she's very versatile. I think the 1, 2, 3 stat line is probably one of the of like the summation of 6 stat, which is kind of the standard, is probably the worst for a solo player. Having one and thwart is pretty tough, but she's able to offset it. Her Phantom Flip is a lot of threat removal. It's 5 threat removal, which it can be overkill.
I want to say about Phantom Flip, 5 threat removal is the perfect amount for specialized training. And
there you go.
In solo play at least. And I quite like going for that with the, what is it called? Combat Specialist, the attack boosting one, because she gets to ready up and attack a lot as well, even if you're defending. It's very good and very fun. I think my big problem for her lies with consistency. The stuns, confuses really hurt her. If you can't do the right basic activation to activate something at the right time, or if you just happen to get bad draws and you can't ready up by using those responses or interrupts, it really slows her down. And it can happen, especially with encounter card effects that you don't expect, kind of messing up your plan. But I really like her. I think she's very fun.
Yeah, and she, I think, naturally gravitates towards protection.
I think if you're a new player, you might not have the right cards for, say, aggression or justice to really make them work, but she really comes with cards for protection, so I think that's a benefit for maybe newer players. And Web Warrior is kind of fun.
Web Warriors are kind of fun. The last Web Warrior we have here is who some argue is the strongest character in the game, which is Spider-Ham. I personally still think Doctor Strange is a little bit stronger than the pig, but it's an argument to be made. Spider-Ham is the strongest of these, I would say. I think the only contender would be Miles, which the fact that we have a tribe of 4 and we're trying to figure out who, not the best one in the tribe, but arguably the best one in the game. See, just kind of shows like Web Warriors are pretty good overall. But Spider-Ham is the cartoony character, right? All of his cards are cartoon, but he gets wild resources in the form of tune counters whenever he takes damage, and that's turns out pretty good, especially when you can mitigate damage with like cartoon physics. So whenever you would take an amount of damage, reduce that amount of damage to 1, which is better than 0 for Ham, because now he's getting a wild resource with that tune counter. A lot of his cards do cost tune counters, so there is kind of a double utilization for the tune counters there, which I have run into problems where I spent all my tune counters. I'm like, oh shoot, now I can't play these cards. But he is so much money. He has so much money, and he's so flexible. He is incredible at thwarting. He is very, very good. What do you think about the pig?
Well, on one hand, he is but a pig. But on the other hand, I think he's the richest character in the game.
Yeah.
And it turns out, if you can play one more card than another character, however good their benefits are, you're getting a whole extra card worth of value.
Yeah.
If you can play 2 extra cards more than another character, well, now you're getting loads of stuff going. What about 3 extra cards? What if you were just, had money raining from everywhere? What if you had 2 encounters? What if you had the Web Warrior trait and we're getting things that way? What if Clarity of Purpose existed?
Dumb.
Like, without Clarity of Purpose, I think he's in contention for richest character in the game. Captain Marvel, I think, comes close. Maybe certain ways you play Doctor Strange with, Winds of Watum, I think it's called.
Mm-hmm.
You can kind of play that multiple times on a turn sometimes. But really, Clarity of Purpose and Leadership, it's a 1-cost upgrade. You take 1 damage, you generate a resource. Well, guess what? You just took 1 damage to Spider-Ham. You've got another tune counter, which can, on another card you play afterwards, be another resource. That is so absurd. It's a 1-cost resource generator that generates 2 resources. It kind of gives you Nova's biggest strength in a way, like his helmet's kind of generating 2 resources every time. But then you've got all the other strengths, then you've got all the other ways to get 2 encounters, and money good, resources good, playing lots of cards in a card game very, very good. And
If
that is
only,
Spider-Ham in a nutshell.
and if only he had a way to get cards. Oh wait, he's a web warrior. Web of Life and Destiny draws you cards. So like the nice thing about the tune counters is you can bank them and use them on future turns, right? So
So good.
you don't have to spend all your money. You absolutely can, but there have been games where I have 12 extra tune counters. I'm just going to spend and play all of my cards. And I had that stream where I drew 100 extra cards in a game. Like he loves taunt. He has his own taunt, which is Petulant Pig, which is less expensive, and you can have people defend for you. If you have web warriors defend for you, you get to draw cards when they leave play. It gets dumb. He gets so much card draw. He has so much money to pay for things that, oh my gosh! He's one of those that I feel like just keeps getting better and better as new cards come out. We see that with taunt and ways to ready. I think the main issue that I have with him is in that game with like where I just kept drawing cards and like that was more of a gimmick deck rather than like a, this is a very, very good deck, is I was drawing 10, 12 extra cards a turn. I didn't have damage. Like I didn't know I could not throw damage. And so I think that could be his weakness, which is also his strength. His thwarting is off the charts. So in a 4-player game, I think that he is probably the best, if not the best, thwarter in the game, and not necessarily from a pure efficiency, but also from you can do more with Ham. His inherent strength also plays into that, and so run him in Justice, he will do fine. Then if you have, but if you're running him in solo, you have to figure out how to figure out damage and mainly minion damage. He has Swinging Web Pig, which is a nice throw of 6 and confused to the enemy or to the villain. But he has Huge Wooden Hammer that can do some minion control. But really, I think you either have to figure out allies or aspect cards to offset his. He needs little damage. He has a lot of big damage. He needs little damage.
Yeah, speaking of like all the card drawing things he can do, you once had a challenge on your LCG Discord server about how many resources can you generate in one turn or something like that. And I decided to break the system with the most degenerate Spider-Ham deck you've ever seen. And I think I drew through my deck, at least 3 times in one single turn when I set it up. And probably more. I can't remember the exact details, but just being able to bank counters and use them when you need them, or heck, whenever you want them, is so powerful. I think if Phoenix didn't have a limit of 1 spent per phase, you can maybe do some crazier things with her as well. But Spider-Ham, no cap on them. Build as many counters as you want. Use them whenever you want. Pay for anything you want. And they're wild. Yeah, it's kind of good. And he has this little card called Ham It Up, which is a 0-cost card, which removes threat equal to the amount of counters he has. They're not capped. So yeah, you might want to spend them a lot, and you can get a lot of value that way. But let's say you're playing multiplayer, and you just try and build up a few, maybe 6, maybe 10. It's not unfeasible, not unfeasible whatsoever. If someone has Overwatch out, you just for, let's say, 10 threat removal for 0 cost, then you duplicate it for another 0 cost card, and it's 20 threat removal for 2 0 cost cards, which is kind of good.
Yeah, it is really interesting. I don't love playing him in Justice. I think that's my solo bias coming in, just because you're piling onto something that he's already just incredibly good at. If I am running him in Justice, I like to go to like the one way or another build to kind of draw into some of more of his cards. I think probably my favorite aspect to play with him would be leadership, just because of the cheese you can run with clarity and then piling on the web warriors. But what about you? What's your favorite aspect to run Porker in?
I feel like if you're gonna run the pig, you might as well go full ham and take out your purpose. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel like if you're gonna do it, do it.
Yeah. Nice. Oh my goodness. Yeah. So I think that this kind of transitions into a really cool question that we got from Cool Caleb, which would be a question. I like Cool Caleb. Cool Caleb has good questions. And so do you think the Web Warriors is the best / most effective tribe archetype when deck building?
This is going to be a really, really long and complex answer.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Wow, that was good. Okay, check and no, I totally agree. Just the symbiotic relationship that they all have and how they feed into each other on top of just how good they are just it works so very well. And so yeah, I think Web Warriors, if we were doing a draft of tribes, most powerful tribes, I think Web Warriors would go first overall.
Yeah, I feel like some X-Men builds, particularly Leadership Uncanny X-Men, I really rate that very, very highly.
Yeah.
But Web Warriors is Web Warriors. Really good stats, baseline. Let's just start with that. Then really good effects. Then card draw from Web of Life and Destiny. Then maybe some attack boosting just to throw it on top with War of the Great Web. But you don't even need to run that. That's just like icing on an already very powerful cake. Didn't think I'd be talking about cake here, but it's so so good. Yeah, I just don't think. I think it's a contest, but I don't think it's a close contest.
Yeah. And so to answer Cool Caleb, yes, they are the best, which also answers Anatomy's question. The comparison, they've played as a group, which is stronger. Web Warriors champions. I'd highly lean towards Web Warriors, just the support that they have off. You would go champions?
So here's the thing. If I'm running champions, if played as a group,
If played
I
as
have
a
four
group.
of them. Yeah, that's the key thing. That's the key thing in his
That's
question.
fair.
Or
That's fair. Okay.
it is the playing as a group kind of part in
Yeah.
Anthony's question, because everyone can have go for champions if you have 4 different card collections. Even with the errata, it gets removed from the game. That's 4 whole turns in a game where nobody's taking any damage, including allies with consequential damage.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, just busted because the champions are still very strong and do include Miles Morales, Spider-Man, and obviously Ironheart. Miss Marvel in a group game, Injustice. I mean, Dive Bomb Nova. It writes itself in white, disgustingly good ways.
Yeah.
For Web Warriors as well, though, it's really good.
Yeah, Web Warriors is really good. I think the limit that you run into Web Warriors is the number of Web Warrior allies that we can run. But okay, yes, I misread the question. If played as a group, I think I agree with you. Champions are stronger. As a group, as a whole, I think Web Warriors are stronger. We have a question from Seabav and Guarismo. They kind of tie in together. What is our conspiracy theory on why we have no Web Warrior allies support in aggression or leadership?
I don't know if I have a conspiracy theory. Maybe I should have started one up. Oh, the designers despise those aspects. They were just no.
Well, I heard that.
The CEO of Fantasy Flight Games specifically said aggression and Web Warriors shall never mix. No, I kind of just think they knew it was a split wave with Champions and Web Warriors. I just think they knew they wouldn't be able to do Web Warriors justice in every aspect, but justice was one of them. They could do justice to them. So I just kind of feel like they decided aggression and leadership. We'll kind of leave those out. We'll maybe give leadership a bit more to the champions. And yeah, I kind of feel like that was really it. I don't think it's that big. And I do think if they ever revisit Web Warriors, I think they will expand them in those aspects, certainly.
Yeah. And I think it's more a design and balance system that they were going for. Like you were saying, like groups get support in different aspects, which just I think helps the health of the game as well, but also just from a balance mechanic. So I guess like that's a fun transition from WKY Green. Oh,
Hold on. Let me help you.
Okay. Which I think is a fun transition to W. Kyle Green's question. Thoughts on future additions to these teams? Web Warriors is one of the most like kind of expanded, right? They're all about having multiple timelines and multiple Spider-Man out there. And then Champions also has a lot more characters that we could add to the team. Like we've seen Braun, which Kyle brings up in their question. But who would you like to see if we got to add a champion and or a Web Warrior to the game?
Yeah, I love this question. And I actually want to shout out Tromdial and Brian T. Stewart, who asked similar questions about who do we like to see as Web Warriors or champions, that kind of thing. And Spider-Man 2099, who has been shouted out a couple of times by these people, I think is a really good one, especially with them featuring in the Cross the Spider-Verse movie. Extremely good movie. I think we talked about that before in the podcast at some point.
Yeah.
I think that would be exceptional. I do think Braun, Vivian, I kind of want to see Snowguard. I don't know anything about her, but she could be so flexible as a basic ally.
Yeah.
I want to see that. Oh, Moon Girl with...
Moon Girl. That'd be my answer, yeah.
Yeah, there's so many good ones. I think that's really, really interesting. I feel like for Web Warriors, I do see what the designers were saying. They've said in the past they were looking for characters that were very different. That's why Spider-Ham and Spider SPDR got chosen over maybe some more known characters, because they're different. They're not just sort of a variant of Spider-Man shooting web.
Mm-hmm.
They have really key different features. One's a cartoon, one's kind of like an anime robot kind of suit thing. And I think Silk would be really fascinating.
Silk would be really cool. I think like kind of outside of the Spider-Man iterations, I think Black Cat would be a
Yes.
really good ally to see in the game. I'm a huge fan of Hobie, just the rock star, just like let's
Yes.
go. There was a really cool video that I watched around the animation of Hobie in Across the Spider-Verse. Just go look up animation for those videos because they're really really interesting. But there's a vast well of knowledge, and I don't think it is out of the question that we would revisit at least the Web Warriors before the end of this game.
Yeah, I need to revisit my answer to that question. I think Hobie's got to be number one for me, and
Let's go.
maybe it's my Britishness kind of interfering as well. We need Spider UK, of course.
Yep.
No. It could be fun, but yeah, there's a lot of really good choices. So I'd absolutely love to see that happen. And now something that's been observed by Macandir, who asks us something about the heroes in the Sinister Motives wave, which is the kind of where champions and web warriors came from. They say this is the wave. They say that wave is the only wave, aside from the core and kind of the first wave, that doesn't include a character that can pull cards from other aspects in deck building. Why is that? And if we got a character from Champions or Web Warriors, who would we like to be able to be the multi-aspect character from the Web Warriors or Champions?
That's interesting. I don't think I know thematically who I'd like to see as a multi-aspect. I guess Spider-Woman kind of works because she can get in and kind of play that Web Warrior build a lot easier with Warrior of the Great Web and everything. So you do have a multi-aspect option for the Web Warriors.
I'll be honest, I didn't notice either. I think an idea I had when I read this question was, what if they had Spider Noir and he could only take basic cards because he's black and white? But
Yeah,
I think that's a fun idea. I feel like it would limit your deck building, but I think it's a fun idea.
yeah,
I don't know who I'd add. Maybe Spider 2099. I feel like the obvious thing is, take Web Warriors from every aspect. But I
yeah,
feel like that's way too powerful because they're really good.
yep,
But maybe champions from every aspect on somebody else could be really fun, or some kind of take 3 champion allies from any aspect.
yeah. It's really that's interesting. I do hope that we do get a multi-aspect because I really like the multi-aspect heroes. I think they're fun, and it's kind of exciting to see how the design team approaches some of those. So I think the last question before we kind of round out the podcast is from Mark, who says, "Big fan of the podcast. Keep up the great content. Super appreciate it. Thanks for listening, Mark." My question is, in future, would either of you be interested in a Maximum Carnage big box expansion or scenario pack? What characters would you like to see and why? Which I think we kind of had talked about. I don't know too much about the Maximum Carnage like mythos, but I'm always down because it sounds epic. But I would be down to. I would like to see more scenario packs, and I feel like characters like this would be a really fun scenario pack.
Carnage is awesome, and I think I'd definitely like to see him as a villain. Something I forgot to mention when talking about different heroes we'd like to see before, I'd love to see an Eddie Brock Venom we could play.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. That would be good. And so yeah, come out with those at the same time. Kind of get a that multiple Venoms. We have multiple Spider-Mans. Like the universe is so expansive that you could easily pull that off. That'd be fun. That'd be really fun. I'd be down. And he has like 5 symbiote allies you can throw out that are just like weak allies.
That would be funny.
Nice.
So yeah, that would be my answer for that one. So thanks for sending that in.
Sweet. Yeah, so I teased it a little bit. Our next episode is going to be actually, I think, a week earlier, maybe potentially. And if it's not, you can hold me personally accountable. We're going to be talking about Age of Apocalypse. That's the new box coming out at the end of this month. We're going to get a couple new heroes, a lot of new villains, and our next episode is going to be our overall thoughts, opinions of the AOA box. I am pumped for this box. It looks so cool. Don't I don't see how Magic doesn't make it into like my top 10 heroes in terms of fun.
Yeah, Magic looks really fun. I actually really like the look of Bishop. So I'm interested to you guys as listeners. Are you kind of on, Team Bishop or Team Magic? Do you have a preference? If you want to let us know, please feel free to go ahead.
And as well as that, continue to send in your questions. We're at shadowofthecast@gmail.com, or if you're watching on YouTube, you can comment on the video. And we've started adding community posts where we'll gather questions before we record. So if you're connected in any of the channels where we are, hopefully you're able to find one of those areas and send in questions, because I'll speak for Villain at this point. We love answering those questions.
Love the question. So thank you for the people who sent them in this time. And if you want to send one in, we'd love to answer it. And yeah, I think that just about does it. Thank you so much for listening, guys. This was fun. Can't wait for Age of Apocalypse. And see you guys then.
Alrighty, peace.
Bye.